So I remember calling him up one day and said, Dad, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to go into business with you, but I've decided not to do so. And in fact, I'm moving to America. And he's like, really? Where? I said, I'm moving to the inner city of Detroit, Michigan to help homeless people.
Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to this last episode of the first season of Through the Fog. I truly hope that you've enjoyed this journey with me, learning about people and how they make decisions and how they find their way through the fog. So, in this episode, I speak with a gentleman living on the other side of the world and working in financial planning and in wealth, with a fascinating story. And we talked about money and wealth personalities and wealth stories and how we view it and what do we rate and why do we rate money so highly as an indicator of success, and all these very interesting questions. And we also talked about meditation, and there's a really interesting story about soup. I want to invite you to listen to my conversation and join me in this conversation with Nathan Mersereau, who's now become a good friend. And I really know that you're going to love this conversation. Have fun. This is Nathan. Welcome, Nathan. It's so good to have you today on Through the Fog. Where do you find yourself today?
Well, I just woke up, so I'm in the process of getting acclimated to the day. I think from a holistic perspective, I'm feeling good physically and clear-headed mentally, spiritually awake, and have gratitude. So thanks for asking the question.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. So tell us a bit about Nathan. Who are you?
It's a question I ask myself. Actually, probably my wife asks that question more often than I do.
in the middle of the night, in a sort of frightened kind of a way. Who are you?
No, it's sometimes I'm an entrepreneur and I come up with ideas that I think are possible. And so early in our marriage with my wife, Michelle, she created a filing system with a physical folder that was titled Nathan's Crazy Ideas. And we just
I love
started
that.
to compile those. But I'm Canadian. I was born in New Brunswick, Canada, which is on the East Coast. I'm the youngest of 5 children. I was an oops baby. My next sibling is 11 years older than I. So, and I tell people that I grew up in Schitt's Creek, which is was a popular TV program about a family that lived in a city but moved to a very rural area in Canada. It's almost as if the Kardashians went bankrupt and they had to relocate to a small motel and figure out how to navigate in a country town. Went to college did my first year at the University of New Brunswick and then transferred to Ontario, which is in central Canada. And I applied for business school there, and it was a well-known school, and I didn't get accepted. So that was a very, I would say, sad and shocking aspect to a naive country boy that was going out to explore the world. So that was, I had to navigate that. And serendipitously, which is the theme that I seem to have show up in my life, I went to a business school in Windsor, Ontario, which was about an hour or two away after I got my Bachelor of Arts degree in London, Ontario. And it was in that time period that I had a significant, I would say, spiritual awakening and realization and introspection about what matters in life. So those were my college years. But since then, I'm married. Michelle and I have been married for 33 years. We have 2 daughters, and I'm currently here in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Oh, that's fantastic. What did you? So I've got so many questions. What is so first one? What is Nathan's craziest idea?
Wow, there's a lot. Um, I think one that pops out is I was flying to London and I decided to write a children's book.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I on the flight, I just kind of played with different themes, and it was, children just being curious and taking the hide and go seek theme and creating
Mm.
some characters around it, and how kids would explore, have a fascination with mystery and intrigue of things, and never got published, but I do have the outline.
Oh, that's quite cool. So I mean, children's book is always, I think, is a very revealing of a person and what they, how they see life. What did you want to be when you were growing up?
I went through the list of the typical aspirational characters: astronaut, doctor, dentist. But then I went to the dentist, and that shifted my perspective quite quickly. Um,
Very quickly.
and then because my father was an entrepreneur, I was really fascinated by business. He had a fascinating story of growing up with nothing, and he created a very successful business and was diligent and hardworking in what he did. And he would communicate with me the values set that he had, and we started to just spend more time together as I was growing up around the topics that he was involved with and the various projects as well. So I thought, maybe I'll do something with numbers. I was fascinated by numbers, and I found math fairly easy as I was studying it in school. So when I went to university, I tried engineering. I said, well, that could be a profession that I succeed in. And I remember looking at the job reports, and how much income these engineers made. And I said, oh, that's a lot of money relative to my perspective as a teenager. And I started university with that intent, and certain quickly pivoted, said, no, this is not for me. I can't figure out all these mathematical formulas in the context of an engineering perspective. So I pivoted to accounting. And then I said, no, that is not what I am drawn to. It seems to be a little too dull for me, Mr. Creative, wanting to write children's books someday. And and so I didn't know what I was going to do, and I focused on liberal arts and said to myself, well, if I take a sampling of various topics that are available in the college setting, maybe some things will pique my interest. So I found that I wanted, but the motivation behind all of this was I wanted to be successful as
Mm,
defined by the material aspect that
mm,
I I grew up in, where my father was the leader of that, and he moved from poverty to more um, material wealth, and was a great person and a great leader. So I'm like, that's what I want
mm.
to. Uh, that's where I want to land. But I had this defining conversation with my father one day, and he asked me that very question. It's like, what are you going to be in the future, or what do you want in the
Yeah.
future? He said, Dad, I want to make more money than you did. And he was kind of taken back, and he said, well, I wasn't expecting that answer, but good luck. And what I now realize, but didn't then, is that that was a seed that was percolating inside of me that created a belief system that my worth, my significance was based upon physical achievement, material achievement, financial achievement, things like that.
Yeah.
So I became very motivated to do my best and create things, try to win academic awards, or just be the good guy on the block, be a good
Mm,
neighbor. And all of those are great attributes, but yet there was an intrinsic motivation that was a little skewed from wanting to have significance relative to that material outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. That this conversation is obviously going in that direction about what true wealth is and your big realization about what life is about. But that's a massive question. That's the question that keeps my mind entertained or keeps my mind busy all the time is what do you want? What do you want? And then I add this little thing to do. What do you want to do? And that's the question I explore. I think all my work, I realized recently, I think all my work comes down to that. Like figuring out what do you want? What do you want to do is such an important question. So just a little earlier, you shared you hit a point where you realized what life is about. And now you have this story about wealth, want to make more money than your dad. And I know for the people listening that you've created this true wealth calculator as well that we'll post a link into the show notes for as well if you guys want to go and try it out. So tell us about that sort of coming together of what life is about and wanting to make more money than your dad, which is such a great line. I love that. And share a little bit about that journey.
It was in the senior year of business school in Windsor, Ontario, that I read a book that was written by an author from Australia who, can't think of the exact title, but he was challenging graduates to look at their life, their values, and the time that they had in the life stage that they were in, to say, hey, do you want to just jump on the corporate ladder and start working in corporate America or wherever the institution would be? Or are there other things from a social standpoint that you would like to consider in terms of service of others? And I just found that very intriguing, because the whole plan was after business school, I would join my father on a business venture. It was in the hotel industry and real estate and development industry. And we had just calibrated the timing of, okay, once I finish school, I'll be going to this job. I had done some internships while I was in business school that was in the real estate industry. And I just started to ask myself, like, why? What is the point of all of this? And one of the things that I realized that I, on a professional basis, really am passionate about today is that families that have wealth creators or significant creators of either story or fame or identity often have family members that live in the shadow of the creator. So while I was very appreciative of my father's mentorship, I was also seeing that I was, in a way, destined to live in his shadow of what he had created, and with good intent, but that was not what was resonating with me personally. So I remember calling him up one day and said, Dad, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to go into business with you, but I've decided not to do so. And in fact, I'm moving to America. And he's like, really? Where? I said, I'm moving to the inner city of Detroit, Michigan to help homeless people. And he was flabbergasted. He's like, how
Oh, yeah.
do you even consider that when you have all this available runway with the plans that we've made? So that was where I had this pivot from, why am I chasing things from an identity standpoint? There was an element of rebellion in that too, like, hey, I just didn't want to be in my dad's shadow or footsteps, and I wanted to carve my own path. So I considered it a moment where I had that social impact awakening, but it was really internal rebellion that fueled it. And that pivot moved me into America. And then I did indeed start helping people that were homeless, and I wanted to save the world. That was my mindset. How can I be of service? How can I save the world? This is such a much more significant mission than building a hotel and charging people to stay overnight in a hotel and build this real estate empire. So that was my motivation and my fuel. I actually burned out physically in that process because I didn't have boundaries of, say, here's how to really protect yourself and live from a balanced standpoint. So I think I was definitely uh, over exuberant in my sense of mission and passion. And then from there, I was looking up. Well, I'm good with. I was looking up for various jobs, and I said I'm good with numbers. I know a lot about investing, the stock market, these different things, and I went into the industry of financial planning and wealth management, personal wealth management, helping people figure out the puzzle pieces of their financial life so that their money is aligned with what their goals are and what they want to
Yeah.
do.
That's fantastic. I'd love to dig into that, spending time helping the homeless, and then sort of rejecting the narrative or your father's narrative, really, because going from I want to make more money than you to I'm going to work with the homeless is quite a jump. Did you at that point feel that money or wealth is something that is evil, or something that's something maybe wrong with it or tainted in a way, or that's yeah, something that's not to be strived for?
That's a great question. I believe I saw it in the form of a container, meaning you just kind of accumulated these dollars and these resources in this bucket or a container,
Mm.
and you just keep counting how much how much higher uh,
Yeah,
content of the container is, and it just seemed to me like there was more beyond that,
mm,
and so
yeah,
that I think was part of the pivot, just the self reflection about what is impactful uh,
mm,
was part of the reflection. And I think it was the timing of just being at a stage of life where I had a lot of optionalities and figured if I was going to take a leap and make that was the time to do it.
yeah. So it's this game. I mean, this it's fascinating to me. I mean, I do a talk on money as well, about money is just a story, and that habit we have of using money as a metric, how obsessed we are with the top 10, and how it's always the top 10 richest people in the world, and the top, and they sort of shuffle around, but it's this metric that we're obsessed with. And I think my suspicion is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. My suspicion is that it's a reliable, in sort of quotation marks, reliable indicator of status and power. And my suspicion is that power came first, and then money came later. We invented money later down the line, and then money became this just an indicator of power, and that's why people like it. It's this. That's why they use it as a metric, and that we're obsessed with it. And there's so much there, because the top 10 list of richest people in the world are all men, and they are almost all of them entrepreneurs or business people. And then the top 10 richest women in the world are almost all heiresses or ex-wives of the entrepreneurs on the other list, which is deeply ironic and funny. But there's a story in there as well about how we, in gender and money, and that's always very interesting for me. But I mean, why do you think? Any comments or thoughts on that? Why do you think people? Why is money the thing, or why is money the marker that we use?
Well, I think to me, there's a couple of angles to respond to that question. Number one, we're wired in our brains to protect ourselves. And for thousands of years, or however long, millions of years,
Mm,
humans would look for ways to take care of themselves. And so there's
mm,
a scarcity aspect of accumulating something for survival. And over time, money became uh, an object for accumulation. But frankly, there are plenty other objects of accumulation in civilization, from land to
mm,
um, physical assets to access or control of channels of enterprise and transportation and commerce and things like that. So all of those really reflect what I think money, a form of money. And I also believe that there's, as we've evolved in society too, there's ego that shows up in this storyline, because if I've got my needs met, I'm not hunting for an animal today to
Yeah.
get food for my family. I can actually go to a grocery store and have all the food choices available and imaginable. Um, you start to say, okay, what do I do once my basic needs are met? Once my
Yeah.
survival needs
Yeah.
are met? And so I would pose that there's this ego aspect that says, well, if you had a little bit of something that was good, why not try a little bit of more of that something? And
Makes sense.
and so, our brains once again say, okay, this is part of survival. I'm testing, I'm curious, I'm looking for solutions, I'm hunting. So that logic becomes this pathway that we start to pursue. And we identify that, well, if I have more resources, people will respond to me in certain
Mm.
ways and feed my ego. I feel good about that. If
Yeah.
I have more resources, I could even use those resources to create outcomes that I've determined uh, already as the storyline. And so
Yeah.
money starts to morph into this real energetic force. I believe there's like a magnetic field force around the topic of money, and it shows up in ways where people are just afraid of that they will never have enough. If you
Yeah.
ask just any random group of people, how much money do you need to be financially okay? It's more than whatever they have. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
could
It's
be,
like that.
I've got $1,000. Oh, it
Yeah.
needs to be $2,000, or I've got
$1,000. Yeah. Yeah.
$100 million. I just need a few more
Mm. Mm.
$1 million and I will be okay. It's always something more. And
Yeah. Is
I find
that?
that there is lack of contentment on this topic of money. And I
Mm.
believe it's the combination of our scarcity brain kicking in to say, I need to survive, with our ego needs for identification and recognition. Because if you look at that list, whatever list of top 10, I can say with confidence that there is a fractured element of that person's persona that is getting placated by the identification of having significant wealth.
Mm.
And another way to interpret it, there's a little child in there that is looking for a form of recognition on that list, and that little child shows up in various ways because maybe they haven't been healed and made whole from things that have happened in the past, and then they turn that into the pursuit of power through money and top 10 lists to justify their needs of significance.
Oh, that's a really big statement. Let's hope one of them listens to the podcast and then they can hear that. That'd be amazing. When is that's really I mean I wrote before you talked about when is enough enough. I actually wrote down on my notes like when is enough enough, Nathan. I know there's this story. I think I don't know if it's just a myth or a legend, but that Rockefeller said how much somebody asked him, how much more do you want? The story sometimes goes on his deathbed. I don't know if that's true, but then how much more do you need? How much more do you want? And he said just a little bit more. This was at the end, not at the start. So, is there something like enough? We were traveling recently. My wife and I, it was her 50th and our 20th wedding anniversary. So we're almost at 33, but like 20, I think is pretty good. And we went to France and ended up in Monaco or Monaco. And we're walking around there and we're standing by the casino, and then all these cars are coming and dropping off these super, so it's like Bentleys and Lamborghinis and all these crazy cars. And across the road is the Chanel store and the Bulgari store and the Cartier and all these uber wealthy things. The Paris Hotel is right there. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, this is being on the edge of a world that my wife and I, or me, would never get into. Like it is very, very unlikely that we would ever become a part of that world in any real way other than a tourist. I mean, I can imagine often my friend and I, we often talk about wealth and money and talk about what we want and all these things. And then there's many kind of scenarios where I can see, if the dice just falls right and with the wind from the back and like everything grace from above and everything works out for the next 20, 30, 40 years, you can get pretty high up. And I can imagine myself in like some sort of scenario. But that world, I could say like there's no way that that's happening, or at least a very, very slim chance. And but then we had this conversation about when is enough enough? Like when does something become obscene? And we were went into the Chanel store, and my wife's a real fan of the brand, and we walked, and there was this beautiful jacket, and it was $14,000. I was like, $14,000 for a jacket, not even an outfit, like a jacket. So that's more than many people in South Africa make in a year. And then people are walking out with bags full of it. And I'm going, is it? And I pride myself often on being a very big supporter of the free market and going, this is the way. We need more people to be more wealthy, and we need more access to the free market. And it's really important to create wealth, especially in a country like South Africa. We desperately need more people to have more money. But where's the line? Like, is the line right there in front of the Monte Carlo casino? It's like, that's the line. Like, once you cross that line, you're going straight to hell. Or like, there's another. Is there something like, how do you even discern when enough is enough?
Great question. I see two parts or two paths to answer that. I think it's wise to take inventory of your personal finances and understand literally how much you need to have saved or invested, and in what categories of investments, so that you could be financially sustained for the rest of your life. And there's financial calculators that can help you do that. And professionals in our industry, we're called financial planners. And so just like you would architect and build a blueprint of a building that you would be putting up, you can architect and blueprint a financial plan that looks at how much you need to save, how much you need to have in a nest egg, what is your spending rate, what about inflation, all these various factors, taxes, etc. There's a number of variables, but that is a practical way to say how much is enough. What I've found in my experience of being in the industry for 30 years is people will see that they have enough, but they still don't believe it. So the numbers on the screen will draw a conclusion, hey, you have enough. But they have a belief system often that's driven by those ego needs or that scarcity mindset that, no, it just can't happen. What if the world ends? Or what if the real estate market crashes or the stock market crashes, etc. But I think it's, to go back to the question, step one of just looking practically at your financial resources and creating a plan from that is a good exercise, because it moves things from kind of the spinning wheel in our heads about what might be enough to here's what the numbers tell me. The second part of that is the satisfaction of life and the aspects that give you a personal sense of meaning and fulfillment. That could be, hey, I want to spend more time doing creative things, or traveling the world, or spending time with family. And many people who have had their head to the grindstone building this financial empire often look up and find that there's very few people in the room with them because they've been so mission focused and often obsessed with a certain outcome that they've ostracized the people around them that would naturally have supported them along the way. And then they built this team that will say yes to what they want them to say yes to. And so the other part of the inventory of how much is enough and how do you know is to do a personal reflection on what wealth means to you.
Okay.
And it's beyond currency. There's in terms of monetary currency. So I created, along with an evolutionary psychologist, an assessment called the True Wealth Assessment that looks at 6 different currencies. And those currencies are things like health, things like community and connectivity, creativity, various categories. And the reality is that your currency of true wealth can be anything that you want it to be. You don't have to be slotted into one area, but often people will focus on just the monetary aspect.
Mm.
And it reminds me of the quote that's attributed to Bob Marley. Some people are so poor that all they have is money.
Yeah, yeah, that's profound. The loneliness aspect is really interesting for me as well because find some of our friends or people we know, not even close friends, are extremely lonely. And part of the reason when I speak to them about it, like I did my master's research on loneliness, and I mean, it's devastating. So loneliness is devastating across the world, but wealthy people tend to be lonely, and one of the reasons I find when speaking to them is that so many people want something from them once they become wealthy that they spend all their time, all their energy, and even money to isolate themselves because so many people want something from them and they've become wealthy. So then they become lonely. And then they surround themselves with these people like this team that says yes, or employees in a way. And even, I mean, my background also as a pastor is I've seen this a couple of times where wealthy people or pastors would befriend wealthy people. I mean, there's this there's this saying we used to have in our not in our church, in our group of friends, all pastors, like I'm as excited as a pastor with a new businessman in his congregation. So there's and pastors would befriend these people because they can obviously donate to the church. But then there's this weird codependent relationship that happens where the wealthy person almost outsources their spirituality and their responsibility to this guru or to this pastor. And many of the pastors are just happy to take it. Like they even intentionally like would keep these people on a dependent on them because now I have all this money, I maybe feel a little bit guilty about it. And then now at least I, give money to this church or I have this guy and he's sort of, he chats to God about on my behalf or, that's sort of how I'm like navigating. So it's just becomes just another employee or another service provider, which for me is like, it's absolutely devastating. And then, yeah, so that's, I mean, on the loneliness one, have you encountered any wealthy people that are not, that are not lonely?
I have. Uh, I believe that we're all made up of light and dark, and it shows up in different ways. Um, and the work to be done is to amplify the light and to work on the dark.
Yeah.
A friend of mine has a expression, freedom's an inside job. So if you are lonely and looking for that sense of validation, that's natural. We're human. Um, Oftentimes, the people who create the greatest sense of a following or gathering crowds together, the pastor profession is a in your story on that is a great example. You become a hero to people, and so that hero is has many great attributes in terms of helping people. But once again, my perspective is that that ego drive, that loneliness to say, am I worth it? And I'm worth more, and the belief that I'm worth more when I have more people around me is the same as the experience that I've had around money, that the belief that if I have more, I'm going to have more significance. So I believe that people express their loneliness in many shapes and forms. And I found that there are people who do have financial resources that are not lonely. And it's because they are content with being themselves by themselves, which that second half is the most important. Because
Yeah.
people can say, hey, I'm me, take me or leave me, I am who I am. That's not my point. My point is to have recognition of who we are in a very lonely and isolated place, meaning we're not looking for external validation in any way, shape, or form. And the people who will move in that path and have self-exploration and self-reflection are the ones that I find are content, and that contentment puts the loneliness at bay.
I want to take a short moment to tell you about The Quest. The Quest is a transformative experience of self inquiry that I run along with my friend Simon in the mountains in Franschhoek. It basically consists of a retreat, at the center of which lies a solo, where you spend time alone in solitude on the mountain, out in the open with only the basic necessities, whilst fasting. That means only drinking water. The entire process is designed to help you work through questions that you have. Questions like, what am I supposed to do next? Why am I here? Why am I making this decision? Why do I need to leave this behind? What do I need to leave behind? Or what do I have to pick up to move forward? It's a process that really digs deep into your motivations and helps you chart a way forward. If you are interested in joining this process, we are running the next one in October, and it is a 4-day in total quest. So 2 days of preparation, one 24-hour solo, and then a day of integration. And if you're interested in this, please go onto my website. This is pierre.co/quest and fill in your details there. And I will invite you to a info session or have a meeting with you to discuss about why you want to go on this and whether or not this is a good fit for you. This has been one of the most transformative experiences of my life. I did my first one, a 12-day quest with a 4-day solo about 8 years ago, and have facilitated many, many, many since. And I'm always amazed about how much this process transforms a human being. I would love to have you become a part of that circle. If this resonates with you, please reach out via my website.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where it's fascinating. Like back to our earlier, the earlier question, what do I want? Is, I mean, my belief is, and I often talk about this as well, is that you don't start with what, you start with I. So that one of my mentors, Bernard, would always say, or taught me a couple of years ago, that who is always greater than what. So who you are is infinitely more important than what you do or what you have or what you own. Who you are is massively important. And that sort of internal validation that I am enough before my bank account, before what I do, before my fame, or before anything else is so important. And if I link that back to I just want to like come back to that true wealth assessment of yours, because you really need to know who you are before you can even before you even do that assessment. Because how do you know, like, how do people get to that point where they realize, or how did you get to that point where you go, well, I need to think about this differently, or I want to think about this differently, or I do think about this differently? Like, how do you move from, I'm just staring at that number on the screen and all I want is for it to go up, to a place where I can go, well, actually, this is an enabler for something else. Actually, what I want is time, or actually, what I want is health, or I want, I, I don't know what the categories are again, but how do you move? How do you get there?
Sometimes it's a jolt. It's a hard stop in life or an event that takes place that wakes you up. Health related issues often do that, where people realize, wow, if I've been putting my body on the back burner, and physically I can't sustain my pace, and their body has some sort of reaction, and the individual realizes, hey, I've got a limited time runway on the planet. How am I using it? Because I believe that time is the ultimate currency. It's the one that we spend and we can never retrieve.
Yeah.
So this awakening or awareness can be from some of the hard moments that life brings us. And I believe life is a mirror. And if we look at that mirror, we're going to see ourselves. But sometimes we paint the mirror so that the image of ourselves self-satisfies. And we need to work on that. We need to go inside and say, who am I? How am I really wired, and who am I? And if I am that little boy or little girl, that lonely child that is looking for external validation from a variety of means, how can I find that I'm safe, I'm secure, I'm protected, I'm loved? Like those self-affirmations because they become what fortifies who a whole person is. So
Yeah.
I think it's the journey that is always the path to freedom. And but what's interesting is that for many of us, the very traits and habits that we exhibited to create external success are often the traits and habits that imprison us, and we
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know how to navigate out of that.
Yeah. Unpack that a little bit.
Well, if you
How have you
just
seen that play out?
Well, I see it all the time with especially wealth creators, entrepreneurs. I see that a lot with myself first. I've seen that very clearly and have worked through that and continue to work through that. I see it with my peers in YPO, Young Presidents Organization, a fantastic organization, but many very driven creators that are looking for some form of validation in their journey of material success. And so if you think about the attributes of okay, what creates this material success? What are the ingredients? Well, you've got to have a vision, you've got to have a game plan, you've got to have you got to take a risk, you've got to put effort and energy into things to create output. Then you have to draw a team together to that are who are inspired by your vision, and then you create an economic engine that starts to function. And so you're building this machine, let's call it a business, that becomes better and better. It certainly goes up and down as economic cycles play out. But that machine is what in the skill and the focus and the, you know, 80, 90, 100-hour work weeks go into at times the ingredient to make that machine and business successful. And so this using the comparison to a plane, the plane gets off the ground after all this energy and work, but the habits and the mindset that created that are the ones that still remain in the founders and the entrepreneurs and the team. And so maybe that's when some of their bodies start falling apart or talking to them,
Mm.
or maybe that's where spouse and partner relationships start to get fragmented, or maybe their children have grown up and they just didn't realize that, wow, I want to spend my time with my teenager, but their friend group is already established. And for most children, it's the very early stages of childhood where the parental impact gets most profoundly made. So the parent who wants to say, "Oh, I've retired or I sold my business, I'm going to hang out with my kids." The kids are like, "No, I'm doing my thing. I'm creating my path." So all of these habits and traits that create success actually become limiters, almost like bars on a prison. That
Mm.
you can have activity, and function, but are you living with that purpose and sense of holistic fulfillment? And that prison becomes where people get stuck, and then they just don't know how to pivot out of it. Some people stay there, some people crash, some people go through the hard work of that self-reflection and saying, what is freedom? And in my personal journey, I came across another quote that's been meaningful by the Persian poet Rumi: "Why stand in prison when the doors are wide open?" And I remember reading that. I'm like, damn, that's me.
Yeah.
I'm in this
Yeah.
prison, something that I created that had material success, but I felt encapsulated by it.
Yeah. That's profound. Sarah, who's also been on the podcast, one of the shows, we often talk about business culture. But then yesterday I had a meeting with a business that's just blowing the lights out, and they're very proud of their values that they've just defined. And they're really cool, and they're really cool business, very like incredible business. And then I sat in the meeting and I said, "Do you realize that the moment you define those values, the shadow side of those same values show up? Like they are these double-edged swords." And although everybody just went quiet in the meeting because they were so proud of so proud of their values, but that's exactly true. It's like the seed; it carries the seed of its own destruction in a way, where you carry it. So that the thing that brought you there. So if you were to get really practical, and somebody listening now sort of realizes, "I want to get out of this," instead of creating a major health event by walking in front of a bus or something, like what can they do practically to start a journey of self-reflection? What does that look like?
Well, I think the big part is to identify the noise in life that consumes your headspace and maybe even physical energy. So a
Yeah.
lot of people are on a very fast-paced calendar, um, and they just don't have margin to do anything else. So they just move from appointment to appointment or schedule to schedule. And I think that creation of giving yourself personal space is probably the most important step as the early stage. And within that, doing a self-assessment of what's working in life and what's not working in life. Because especially in the business world, we could say, well, what's working in life is I have a great business. And because all of our focus and energy is on that, we don't even consider other options or other categories outside of that business because it's all consuming. When in fact, health is a distinct category, relationships, family, personal joy. When's the last time you laughed, like belly laughed? Maybe that's a question on the inventory
Oh,
assessment.
that question is like my wife always tells me she knows I'm resting when I start making jokes and laughing. And it was such a when we were on a vacation a couple of weeks ago. It takes me like a week, and then I start making jokes. She's like, "Oh, you're back." Well, like, shut up. It's like I'm
Well,
working hard.
credit to spouses and partners. And I would say that's the other part is to go to your close circle, people
Mm,
who
mm,
would give you honest assessment, who care and support for you, but they're not yes people. They're
yeah.
they're independent in their mindset. My wife certainly meets that description. When we got married and the minister announced the two shall be one, she looked at me and mouthed the words, "Which one?" And I kind of realized, oh boy, I
Oh,
didn't think
oh,
about that.
it's like, oh, crap.
But it's the people who are close to us, living with
Yeah.
us, you know,
Mm,
rubbing elbows with us, and in whatever worlds we're in, business or relational worlds, that can give
yeah.
us input around, hey, this is what I see. And when
Mm,
people that you know, love, and trust say, this is what I see, and you're open to that feedback, no defensiveness, listening, being present, that's when the clues will start to show up about
yeah.
what might be available to explore that's more abundant and more life-giving than your current moment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, we often talk about that. How a friend, how important a group of friends is, and and then I have this line that I always say, like, good friends will help you move, but best friends will help you move a body.
That's a good one.
So who are those friends? Like, those are the ones you need to call. The friends you can call at 3 a.m. to say, "Hey, you won't believe what happened." And then those are the friends that'll tell you the truth about who you are, right? So there's a I often speak about this in Africa. We have this concept called Ubuntu, which means I am a person because of other persons. And in Africa, like on a high level of abstraction, people understand themselves in terms of their community and their tribe, not not as an individual. Like this very extreme sort of individualistic culture that's just a list of characteristics. You know, I am intelligent, I have autonomy, I have free will, I have memory or soul, all these things. In a strict sense of the word, in Africa, it would be I have family, I have friends, I have a community, I have a connection to the spirit world. It's all of that, which for me is so beautiful. Like, it's such an important thing. But it's hard when you get rich and now you're lonely and now nobody's telling you the truth because everybody's just telling you how awesome you are.
Well, as you were going through the list of those attributes of people connected to community and shared experiences, I would pose that they might be the wealthiest people on the planet.
Yeah.
And how about we create a top 10 list of those attributes? And if we, if we looked at just a basic index of joy or happiness and put quantitative metrics around that, how might that show up in terms of communities? I'd love to see a graph of a region that had a heat map where there was joy, whether there
Yeah.
was other parts of this currency system that did not land in the financial balance sheet category. I think that might be
Yeah.
very
Yeah. I mean, that's really, I would definitely agree. I mean, living in Africa, people also need money, a lot of money. But I mean, that is always interesting for me when you see those like the top 10 happiest countries in the world, and they're always like the Scandinavian countries, and then always the Scandinavian countries also have this really high suicide rate. And I was going, but how do you connect those two? You're the happiest country in the world, but it's not really about happiness. It's really about wealth and security and sort of human rights and those things. But those aren't the things that make you happy necessarily. I mean, they're things that keep you safe and things that keep you technically free, but they're not necessarily the things that make you happy. And it's things like community and health and all those things make you happy. I'm reminded, however, I have to tell you the story. At least you're Canadian originally, so you're not American, so that maybe this won't be that insulting. But there's a story of the artist William Kentridge, who was probably the most famous South African artist, and he was at a dinner in Europe. I think it was in Europe somewhere. And then the woman next to him asked him, "William, are you content with your life?" And then he goes, "Do you mean am I happy?" And she goes, "Oh, good God, no. Happiness is for Americans. Are you content with your life?" And I just love that line. It's such a good line. No, happiness is for Americans. But
it's a good one.
it's a very good one. I think what she means is the obsession with frivolousness, maybe, or something. It's not, but and I like that idea of being deeply content with your life. Like, are you satisfied with your life when you look at that number on the screen? Does that give you? Are you satisfied? Are you proud of your life? And when you look at the wealth metrics that you have, maybe those are obviously a lot better ones. But then at the same time, you still need wealth to kind of make those happen, right? So that's one of the
Yeah.
dichotomy. Or do you not? What do you think?
Well, going back to our needs as humans, we need security
Mm.
and money, resources really help fortify the aspect of security.
Yeah.
The challenge is that we're in a world that's messaging through social media and marketing channels and Chanel advertisements about, well, this is what it means to be happy,
Yeah.
wealthy, fulfilled, etc. And then we create hero images from the people who gain the most followers on Instagram or TikTok, etc. And we are, once again, it's a brain issue where we're triggered to say, ooh, there might be more. And all of these messages are developed to tap into the insecurity of humans. That's what many marketing messages focus on. And I think that it's about understanding the balance of what physical, financial resources one needs to be secure, in that you can answer how much is enough from both a calculation and assessment standpoint around the numbers. But I've found that people, even if they have clarity about, okay, my financial numbers look sound, the mindset will be what runs interference with the advancement of a contented life once there is enough. And
Yeah.
so it was my wife actually that developed a money personality quiz that's available on our site that allows you just to look at takes 2 minutes to complete, 14 questions about what is your view of the topic of money. And you'll see that it just gives a quick snapshot of
Mm.
how you're individually wired.
Yeah.
And when you have that realization, then you can, once again, if I know who I am and I'm getting feedback from unbiased sources, then I know how to work on what's next. And that's my hope for people, is that they would be reflective on this topic of money, define what true wealth means to them, and build a community around that.
Mm.
Get people in conversation that can help you advance so that you're not so poor that all you have is money.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us a little bit more about the personality, the money quiz, personality money quiz. What are some of the personalities? Are they like sort of like Enneagram, like 9 archetypes, and you gonna get one, or is it like a scale, or it's like a 360 spider diagram? How does it work?
Yeah, there's 24 avatars that we created, and it's really about the dimensions of how you think about different topics. So there might be like a money mindset that looks at, okay, I'm outcome oriented, or I believe scarcity always exists, so I
Mm,
need to protect and preserve what I have. That's a category. If you're focused on personal peace and you want to use money for that end or to support your immediate family, and that creates your drive and your sense of peace and purpose, that's one area. Or maybe you're externally focused and you're like, well, that business needs, I need to be on the top 10 list of whatever list motivates you. And once again, this is not about
mm,
judgment, this is bad or evil. That's not it at all. It's just about what is. And then if you're more wired around money and decisions, like, well, I'm very methodical and I want a plan, I want a system. That's one part of an archetype versus, well, hey, I'm an explorer. I can create. I listen to my intuition about money. So I just kind of go for it, and I'm not afraid to try new things. That's another end of the archetype. And then finally, the fourth area is how you express the purpose of money. So the emotional connection, the you use money to create community, and you're generous and you're others focused. That's one end of the continuum versus purpose driven. Hey, I want to change the world. So I'm a purpose driven leader. That's my money personality assessment. So I show up and I say, hey, how can I impact the world, and how can I use financial resources to do that? But there's many, there's 24 of those avatars, and encourage people to explore what lands for them.
Oh, that's really awesome. I'll definitely use them. I once used some of the Jungian archetypes and overlaid them over some money questions, and it became really interesting. I went with it's this really crazy event that I was at a year ago, asked to speak at, and it was all CEOs and CFOs of banks and asset managing firms, and it's this closed sort of Chatham House rules event where they have proper big debates about policies and all this stuff. And then me, which is this weird, I'm like this weird kind of jester voice in the wilderness, crying, shouting obscenities from a stage. And then talked about the king, the jester, the warrior, and the mage as sort of loose archetypes for money. And it worked so well, and it ignited such an interesting conversation because all of a sudden everybody had like a third thing that they could talk about. It's like, well, if you put your business, is your business behaving like a king, or is it behaving like a warrior, taking like a bad? So each one has like a shadow side. So you have a good king, good warrior, and the bad warrior takes unnecessary risks, and the good warrior bides his time and calculates, and it became fascinating. I love stuff like that. So I'll definitely put that link in the comments on the show notes as well for people to go and do that test. It's really fascinating and very, very good. And talking about, I mean, we've touched on it a couple of times, is scarcity and abundance. And it's a real big question. Do you think people would often say that, you have a scarcity mindset, or if you have an abundant mindset? Do you think there's money is objectively scarce or objectively abundant?
Great question. And I believe money is abundant when it's not limited to a currency, a monetary
Ooh,
currency.
you have to explain that.
It actually is the essence of the true wealth belief system that I created, in that, uh, and I'll share an example. My wife and I were with a group of friends with our YPO forum group, the small group of members that get together on a regular basis. And we took a trip with our spouses or partners to British Columbia, Canada, at a beautiful resort. And scenery was amazing. The food was amazing. The conversations were great. We hiked and explored, did fun stuff. And it was near the end of their tourist season at this resort. And a number of the workers there were young people. And we got in conversation with them to say, hey, now that the season's winding down, what's next for you? And there was about 5 or 6 workers that we all had conversation with. And we were having, we heard some of the most inspiring next calendar plans, next steps in the calendar from each of these, whether it was, well, I'm going to Australia and I'm going to be surfing for probably a 4 to 6 month period. And I'm going to be exploring with my friends different waves and areas that are great for surfing. Or I'm going to the Maldives and I'm going to check such and such out with scuba diving and meet up with some friends there. And as they were describing their next steps, it was because they had made enough money working at this resort on a limited calendar time frame that they could do these other things around the world, which were amazing. And I just looked at Michelle and I said, I have to get on a plane and be in a business meeting. And I'm doing that for the next 2 weeks. These guys are going to Bali, Maldives, Australia. And I just said, I think I just see who's wealthier. And I found that their story was inspiring of what's available with resources. And certainly money, currency, physical currency is an activator to make that happen. But when everyone just is focused on the accumulation of more and more and more of that currency, they are wasting away all these opportunities that are available that could be experienced that really create the most financial life fulfillment that's available.
I love that story. Getting on a plane to go to a business meeting. That must have
Yeah,
sucked.
wow, I'm really wealthy. I'm
That's
trapped in
yeah.
my cage, my calendar cage, and
At least you had a nice seat. Maybe.
yeah, it is a nice
Yeah.
seat, and
Yeah.
and you pay more to be in that nice seat,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
actually the plane lands at the same time for everyone. It's a very interesting dynamic
Yeah. Yeah.
on
And
why we do that.
it's not safe though. You don't get there faster.
You do not get there faster. No.
Yeah, no, not at all. I wanted to ask you, so we were introduced by a mutual friend, Miranda, and she told me that Nathan has a story about soup, and that he needs to tell the story about soup. He had soup with one group of people and soup with another group of people. So could you please share the soup story?
It's interesting that soup shows up in different ways in my life story. But the one that I believe Miranda, who's great, she's our mutual contact, and is probably referring to is when I was invited to attend a gathering of maybe a dozen of some of the country's wealthiest people. That was at a billionaire's compound in Southwest America. And it was to network, it was to look at opportunities to be charitable, impact the world in different ways. So there was a good intent, but I find myself at this billionaire's home, massive home, horses are running outside, it's massive amounts of land. There's servants bringing in lunch, and we have this big table where we're sitting at for our lunch, right beside this indoor swimming pool. And I mean, it was just like this massive, being in a massive hotel is what this was
Yeah.
like, being in the
Yeah.
person's house. And I was grateful to be there for sure. But the first course that we had was soup. And it was like the most expensively concocted soup I've ever eaten. I'm like, it was really good. But I had a flashback as I was eating the soup of years earlier when I did move to Detroit, Michigan to help the inner city folks. And I actually had to eat at a soup kitchen because my father had cut me off. He's like, good luck, you're on your own. And while I was there to help people in the soup kitchen, I was also eating in the soup kitchen. And my flashback was to that moment of being in that soup kitchen and how comfortable it was, in the sense that, granted, everyone had a story. No one was wealthy. No one had their pocket full of money, but there was laughter. There was kind of joking and jesting about, hey, who's going to clean up the dishes this time? And I just had contrast through those two moments of this amazing soup in a billionaire's lunch table, and compared it with my soup that I ate in the soup kitchen years earlier. And I found that billionaire soup was marginally tastier for sure, but it wasn't exponentially better.
Yeah.
And in fact, I had this awkwardness on being surrounded by all these, defined by successful entrepreneurs and business leaders at the table. It was kind of muted laughter and polite small talk and, pass this over, please. May I have another? Versus the soup kitchen was just like, hey, this is who we are. How's the soup today? And what's up today? Very relational, and connection was much deeper, it seemed to be at that moment for me. And that was my soup kitchen contrast story.
Yeah, I love it. I love that story. Thank you for sharing it. There's something so beautiful about that, and I've encountered it a couple of times with people where they are very comfortable at either of those tables, and that's for me always such a unique superpower where they sort of can spend. Especially again, my friend Bernard always talks about who over what. He consults and coaches with world leaders, literally presidents, and the CEOs of massive multinationals, and then at the same time would the next week would be sleeping on a roof somewhere in India, helping like the poorest of the poor and spreading like all these great. So this crazy life, and just sort of navigates between these worlds all the time because money isn't a thing. Like I think money is the last thing in the world that Bernard ever thinks about. It's a beautiful thing. How do you make decisions, Nathan? If you have a big life decision coming up, how do you make it?
Well, I think decisions are these moments in time where pivots happen or not. So I used to put a lot of pressure on myself around decision making. And I would tell people that I lived from my neck up. Everything was in my head. I would analyze it. I love rationale, logic, pros, cons, the Ben Franklin, draw the T, put the pros on the left, the cons on the right, count them out. And what I realized is that was a pretty limiting approach to me. And I make decisions based upon, actually I have a process where through the practice of meditation, I get the squirrels out of my head. I empty,
Oh yeah.
I try to get the noise, the chatter out of my brain, because I find that is where a lot of confusion and competing interest and aspects of scarcity brain and ego shows up. And so I try to empty that container, and I find that takes intent and work. And the practice of meditation, which I've started about 5 years ago, has been the most transformational exercise and experience that I have found. And so I use that practice as the decluttering of all these presuppositions that I'll carry, fears, anxieties, ego stuff. And I try to say, okay, here is the situation. And I try to detach myself, now put it on a mental map or a board, and say, here are the issues that I see. I try to then, when it involves people, I try to consider the perspective that the person has. Uh, my ego would tell me, oh, they have this hidden agenda, or they are good, they are bad. I try to detach from that judgment and see where they're coming from. And then I identify, okay, what lane might this decision be in, whether it's a business lane, whether it's a family, whether it's a relational, whether it's, with one of my children, like whatever lane of definition that is. And then I try to have a sense of what might be possible in that lane from an evolutionary standpoint. What's not happening that might be available. And sometimes it's not available, and decisions have to be made that a stop sign goes up and there's a hard pivot. But it's through that process that I try to inventory things. And then I go to my intuition. And I found that my gut, my intuition is my best decision maker. And we all have it. But it gets it gets crowded out by all of those other things that I mentioned earlier in the process, which has been my experience, where I would let the squirrels in my head or the rampant thoughts of analysis or the ego needs be the thing that define it. And once that container is emptied, I'm quite confident that decisions will be the best that I can make. And sometimes no action is decision. Like not every decision means, a door needs to close, door needs to open. Sometimes patience is the best action as well.
Yeah, no, that's very true. My one of my friends, and he used to be a CEO. It's very interesting. He used to be a CEO of a national retailer, clothing retailer, massive, massive, huge business, and he resigned. He resigned, sort of went all the way to the top and resigned, and he said, "I'm not sacrificing my life on this altar," and then left the whole business, and then is now doing very extremely beautiful transformative work with young men and teenagers and all these like interesting things. But he always says your intuition is always right, and if it wasn't right, it wasn't your intuition. I was like, well, I think that's a little bit of a circular argument, but I get what you're saying. It's a real good one. What is one of the worst decisions that you've ever made?
A decision that I regret is not having more children. And
Oh
it
yeah,
was at a time in our marriage where Michelle and I were at a rocky time. And
yeah.
I was hyper focused on this business creation and being the entrepreneurial superstar and chasing all the things of material success that I
Mm,
talked about earlier. And I found that this whole aspect of having more children came up in our marriage. And I just felt that we were both not on the same page because interpersonally we were having a tough time. Fortunately, we've since worked through that, and I just so appreciative of her as a life partner. And
yeah.
but yeah, that was a decision that I look back and say, I regret that one. I also regret the way I interacted with my father
Mm,
during that pivot moment after business school to say, no, no, thanks, Dad, I'm not working with you. Um, I think it was uh, my sense of wanting to communicate a message in a place that I felt I had to communicate it forcefully to be heard. And that was a belief that I had, that I think if I could do a do-over, I would be more appreciative and accommodative of his perspective, and a little more generous on how that message was applied.
Thanks for sharing that for both of those stories. Thanks for sharing that. Have you spoken to your father? Or did you get the chance to speak to him about it?
Yes, fortunately, our relationship mended over the years. He would kind of observe me from a distance. He had deep love for me because we were close, but the alignment of spending each day together did not materialize as he hoped. So he grew to respect the path that I took as an entrepreneur. In fact, that was what he did himself. To get out of his situation as a child. So I think that respect really evolved, and over the years, we continued to have great conversations, and I appreciated his mentorship as I grew in my journey and building a family and such. I also realized, and this applies for both of my parents, that their IQ skyrocketed once I left home and started paying my own bills. And I'm like, wow, they were really, really bright people. They were idiots at the time when I was listening to them, and I had all the answers. But now that I had more responsibility and perspective in life, I think they were at the
Yeah.
genius level. I missed that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, it's like, what happened? Are you on a different diet? Like something happened, really. Like you're much smarter than you were a couple of years ago.
Exactly.
Love it.
So as our children age, I'm having some satisfaction with a few text messages of hey pops, thanks for the advice, and
Oh yeah.
as they are working into the adulting world and taking more
Together.
responsibility with uh, money and time and decision making. So it's funny
That's
how the
fantastic.
cycle of life keeps rolling.
I love that. We are still a couple of years away from that. I await it eagerly.
Your
So
IQ will suddenly spike, and
all of a sudden, I'm going to be amazing again.
yeah, you will return.
That's awesome. Tell me, Nathan, what lies ahead for you?
Well, I would say I'm most excited about what the future holds in terms of impacting the world.
Mm,
And as I define that, it shows up in helping people improve their relationship with money and defining what meaning and purpose means to them, and how financial resources can be the activator of that. I I see the message of true wealth being what defines fulfillment. And I hope to build a community around the message of true wealth. I also, as you mentioned about your friend, I'm fortunate to work with many people that have significant financial wealth. Um, Actually, even in our YPO world, I lead a chapter called Global One, and we're planning an event in Monaco next October. So
there
this
you
is going
go.
to be a fun celebration. But I hope to inject conversation about living with purpose and meaning
Mm,
in the midst of a community that has uber wealth but is still hungry for that sense of connectivity and sense of purpose. So, but at the same time, I also value the uh, the workers at the resort who are going to New Zealand, Australia, Bali, and Maldives to live their best life. And so, I want to hang out with those people at the same time and learn from them.
yeah. Or Cape Town. Cape Town is getting flooded by digital nomads all the time. I must
It's a
say they're
great
not always
destination.
that popular on the receiving end. Looks great from the other side. On the receiving end, people are like, hmm. So we have
Yes.
many restaurants here that now have no laptop signs. Uh, so tell me a little bit, what advice do you give to your kids all the time? What would they say? Dad always told us this.
I identified three operating principles and it is the advice that I give to my children, and they still repeat it. Number one, be kind to one another. So I believe relational connectedness has a lot of significance, and that can be within the family unit, it can be within the work community, the culture community. Number two, have an attitude of gratitude was my saying to my children. And so looking beyond the injury of the moment or the disagreement or even whatever circumstance shows up, gratitude is the great leveling force to level set who we are as humans. And it's a currency that's available to every one of us. It's circumstantially difficult to see because many things are painful, not fair at times, but seeking out a glimmer of hope through gratitude, I believe, is a very powerful self-sustaining force. And then the third piece of advice I gave my children is eat lots of ice cream, which was simply a reference to have fun, like do the things that bring you joy. And once again, press that energy button that lights you up. And I think if we do that, whether it shows up in that belly laughter or that crazy quiz game or the let's try something new this weekend experience, it can really be fuel to a great life.
That's fantastic. I love that. We love ice cream. We go for ice cream all the time. Too much. What is a book that changed your life?
The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
That's a good one. I love that book. That's a good one.
Yeah, I came to Jackson Hole, Wyoming for the first time about 5+ years ago for a YPO forum retreat. And we had a facilitator lead our group on the topic of meditation. And that book was one that was recommended as a result. At the time, I really had no interest in meditation, but I started reading the book and I found that there was an echo in my life as I read the pages of the book. And the main thing that caught my attention is Michael Singer talks about this voice in our head that constantly is in chatter state. And he labeled it the inner roommate. And it's the voice that said, watch out for this, or what about that? And many times it shows up as the judge, the critic, whether it's criticizing judging others. And so he invites people to name that inner roommate. And so I named mine, and my wife, Michelle, named hers. And we found that our inner roommates were actually debating one another. It really wasn't us. It was our inner roommates that were having arguments over some nonsensical topic. And I remember we paused and said, this is actually not a conversation that I started. It was the inner roommates that are going back and forth in the banter. So that became a great book on his journey to and the inner work that he did to find peace and fulfillment and a sense of impact. So I was inspired by that story, and it led to more practical work on the side of meditation. And I'm a big advocate of that book and the associated practices.
No, that's great. It was one of my favorites as well. Yeah, and I'm also avid meditator. I started meditating in my teens and been meditating on and off forever. Yeah, like 30 odd years now, and it's the most precious practice and something I can recommend to anybody. And favorite restaurant in all the world? Doesn't have to serve soup.
I can't think of the name of the restaurant, but it was when we did a family trip to Rome, and it was at the top level of a hotel outdoor restaurant. We had this multi-course meal, and just to have all the senses in play with the beautiful scenery and sights of Rome with these culinary creations, it was pretty spectacular. In fact, we were just recounting that. We're fortunate to be able to take our children to different places in the world and experience different cultures, and the food culture was one of the important ones to experience each step of the way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. Love a good restaurant. Love Rome as well. Really great. The you rattled off a couple of quotes while we were speaking. What is a? It doesn't have to be one of those, but what is a quote that you live by?
I I made up the quote of integrity is my North Star. So
Yeah.
I believe that I want to be a glass box. Who I am is who I am, and authenticity is the key aspect of my creed. So I'm human. I make mistakes. I used to seek perfection and think that that was the ultimate destination. But to me, living in integrity means to and make and integrity is my North Star. That means I'm going to ask myself the hard questions of what can I learn from this circumstance? How did I contribute to things? Where did my shadow show up that was a factor in the storyline? What do I need to pivot? Who do I need to forgive? Who do I need to ask forgiveness of? Those are all things that I found, in living with integrity and using that lens to actually using it as a mirror to see myself. That's that's what I hope to live by and be known by.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. Integrity is my North Star. And just to finish off, where can people find you online if they want to connect or follow you? Or are you on TikTok, Mike, Nathan?
I'm sorry to disappoint, but I am not on TikTok, and my Instagram posts are pretty meager. But I spend my time helping people with this topic of money and the exploration of true wealth. And my company is Planning Alternatives. So if you go to planningalt.com, our true wealth assessment, our money personality quiz will be there. And my bio and email are there. So I invite people to reach out if they have anything that they would like to explore. And I also have a real passion about helping families address this
Oh,
topic of
cool.
money within the family unit and
Mm.
facilitate conversations and family meetings and retreats even for families to come and be in a beautiful setting, connect with nature, but explore how this true wealth and the topic of money has influenced their family and what is the impact and legacy that they want to create going forward.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's good to know. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being so available. That's really awesome. When I see the sun is rising on your side of the world and the fog has lifted, so appropriate for our show. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, Nathan, and taking the time out and your most precious resource, your time, and spending it on this show with me. It's been a joy and very informative. I'm looking forward to this journey with you as well.
Thank you, Pierre. It was a pleasure spending time with you. All the best in what you're creating with impact as well.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening or watching, and thank you for being on this journey with me as we try and figure out and find our way through the fog of life and work. So, I've been writing a really short little daily letter that comes out each weekday, and literally very short. It's less than 50 words, and it is a burst of inspiration with some thoughts on strategy, how to find your way, how to become a better human being and do work that matters. You can go to thisispierre.co/daily letter to sign up and become a part of this community and hear about all the things that we get up to firsthand. Thank you for being a part.